Hey everyone, I'm Spencer.
I'm Lara, and we're married with board games. We love creativity in board games, but sometimes it's difficult coming up with new ideas. Ask any creator and they'll tell you. It's why some people leave the creating to others.
But sometimes you don't need to come up with something new. Take Illimat, for example, the 2 to 4 player card game from Together Studios. There are some pretty familiar concepts in the game, and it even looks like something old.
But the question is, can you take something old and make it feel new altogether? We'll answer that question, but first, here's a quick look at how to play.
Okay everybody, here we have Illimat. Now the point of the game is to be the first person to get to 17 points. You keep track of your points down here, and you gain points at the end of each round. A round is over once all the cards from a deck are played and all the cards out of each player's hands have been played. Once you've gone through the deck and everybody's played all the cards out of their hand, you'll total up your points and then you keep track of them again on this point tracker down here. Each quadrant of the mat, the board, is called a field, so you can think of it as like you're laying down crops in a field. The game begins with 3 cards in each field, 3 of the playing cards, and then 1 what is called a luminary. A luminary has a special effect that when revealed will apply until it is removed from the board. Real quick before we get into how to play, I want to show you that this isn't a normal deck of cards if you haven't noticed already. You've got basically a card for each season with the exception of the star card, but then you have winter, summer, spring, and then autumn. And the cards go 1 through 14 because you've got a full card that can either be a 14 or a 1. So basically numbers 1 through 14. At the beginning of the game, each player will get a set amount of cards to begin with. On your turn, you will play a card, do an action with that card, and then draw back up to 4, and that's it. The game comes with these player aids that on one side tells you the actions that you can do, and the other side tells you how you're going to get points. Here's how you'll get points at the end of each round. First, there's Bumper Crop, so the person that has collected the most cards will get 4 points. Sun-Kissed is the player with the most summer cards will get 2 points. Frostbit, if you have the most winter cards, you lose 2 points. And then each Fool, Ocus, or Luminary acquired is worth an additional 1 point. So I talked about the Fool cards. If you have one of those, you get a point for each one. These tokens up here on top of the box are called Ocus tokens. Then the Luminaries also are worth a point if you have those at the end of the round. This box is called the Illimat, and it's actually very important in the game. Throughout the game there will be some effects, like when you play a face card into a field, you will turn the box to match that season of what you played it in. So for example, if you played a winter face card in this quadrant, you'll turn the board, or you'll turn the Illimat to match that season. It's important because in each season, where it corresponds to the field that it's pointing to, has a restriction. For example, spring, if this is pointing over here, you can't do the stockpile action. If this is winter, anything that this is pointed to on the winter side, you can't do the harvest action. And finally, autumn, you can't sow. Okay, so what are all those actions? What does that mean? So again, like I said, you've got a hand of cards, and you're trying to collect the most cards, essentially. And so what you'll do is you take one card. The sow action, you're basically just discarding a card into a field. So you just put it down. Again, if I try to play an autumn, I couldn't, because autumn says do not sow. Then you have an option of the harvest action. Harvest is, you can collect cards that match the value of the card that you're playing into that field. Here's a perfect example. So if I played this Night of Winter into this spring field, I can then collect any combination of cards that add up to 11. So I could take this 9 and this 2, because that adds up to 11, along with the card that I played, and I can add them to my harvest pile. And finally, you have the stockpile action. The way that works is, you can combine your card with one or more other cards in the field to create a new value, but that value has to be of a card that you already have in your hand. For example, here are the cards I have in my hand. I've got a 12, a 6, a 12, and a 7. What I can do to stockpile is I can place this 6 with this 6. That is now a 12, and I can do that because I have a 12 in my hand. On future turns, you can continue to build onto a stockpile. Instead of building onto this and changing the value, I can put a 12 here to say, hey, now this is a stockpile of 12. So myself or anybody else can now add only 12s to that stockpile. And then on future turns, I can harvest that. So if I wanted to, I can harvest, I could play this 12, I would get this and this, I would collect all of those cards for my harvest pile. If through the course of collecting your cards you clear a field like that, what you then do is you claim one of the Ocus tokens, if there are any left, and then you can flip over a Luminary. Luminary has a special effect that will remain in effect until it's removed from the board. They are all explained in the rule book. They all have some text that explains what they are, but here's an example of one. The Maiden, basically with the Maiden, winter has no effect as long as she's on the board, regardless of where winter is on the field. After the field's cleared, you'll reseed it, and then what you'll do is if it gets cleared again, the person that clears it will collect the Maiden as well as another Ocus token if there are left. Here's some of the other luminaries. You've got the River, the Changeling, you've got the Children, you've got the Newborn. And again, they all do something special. It's either a lasting effect or an immediate effect when they're removed. And I won't go over all of those because it would take too much time for me to explain every effect to you. Again, you go around, you take turns until all the cards have been played out of the deck and out of your hands. And then once that's done, you look and see who gets points based on what the different goals are. And then if no one's reached 17, you deal out again and you start a new round.
Okay, so not a whole lot there. It's a small box. But what's there is pretty awesome.
Yes, everything is utilized in the gameplay except for this little band here across the box.
Yeah.
That's it. And I really like that.
Well, I think it's cool that, they didn't put an extra unnecessary component in there for like the change of the seasons. They just use the box.
Let's just use the box. I think that's great.
That's really cool. And I just like the overall look, the aesthetic of the game.
Yeah, it feels old. It feels like something that's been around for forever.
Or it's like some kind of secret society would play this, just like the black and white and the different symbols.
It's called Illimat and you're thinking like Illuminati maybe. Or something?
I don't know. But what I think is really cool, especially the aesthetic, is you've got the black and white and then some kind of muted tones with the different seasons on the cards. But you have that stark, the
card backs?
Yeah, well, like for the luminaries, those red backs.
Yes, that's what I meant.
They just pop so much, and it's really cool. And I like the look of that. So overall, it's a really good looking game. The quality of the game, of the components, is really nice, right?
It is. It definitely is. Especially the fact that they went with metal Ocus tokens.
Yeah, the metal tokens. Yeah,
those are really nice, albeit interesting choices.
I like the tooth.
They're like the rejected things from Monopoly.
That's hilarious. Bathtub.
Tooth in a bathtub and a soldier?
Yeah, soldier and a sailboat.
Yeah.
But I love the weight of those, the clinking, and then the trackers.
They make it feel valuable. Yeah. They make it feel like you've just achieved something when you get one of those.
Really, really, and the cards themselves are good quality, and I like the actual cloth. Although it does, by you folding it up and putting it in here, you do have to deal with the creases. Yeah. I don't know if there's any way around that.
The only thing I can think of is that it's probably got a little bit of starch into it. So maybe if we were to wash it and iron it and then fold it, it won't have the folds in it so badly. Kind of like a brand new t-shirt when you get it. It's got those folds in it. Wash it and then you fold it up and it doesn't have those folds in it anymore.
Maybe. I'd be afraid to test
that.
I'm
a little bit afraid to do it because I don't know what will happen.
Yeah. But anyway, there are creases, but again, it's not really anything that can be avoided because you're folding it up to put it in this box.
Right.
Overall, though, excellent quality game for sure. So let's talk about the gameplay.
Okay.
What do you think about just the overall gameplay, like what you're doing?
It definitely achieves the goal of trying to feel familiar with the suits.
Yeah.
They're new suits. They're not hearts and spades and clubs. They're something new. They're the seasons.
And I like that.
I like it. The card layout is familiar.
Yeah.
And then just the idea of having the fields and stuff. I mean, it kind of like solitaire almost a little bit is what I think of especially with stockpiling. I kind of think about a little bit like solitaire. I know that's a weird.
I get what you're saying though, the way that they stack up, kind of like solitaire. But speaking of stockpiling, so you have those different actions you can do. You can just do simple sowing.
You can sow.
You can harvest, which is again the main way you get those cards into your harvest pile. This stockpiling is a very interesting mechanism.
Yeah, and this is where I think it becomes a gamer card game.
Yeah,
is in the stockpile.
Well, it's tricky at first to number one grasp the concept of it. I think it's just it's not difficult in theory, in practice, but there's something about getting it across to people and myself understanding exactly how it works. Because since you can do it in two ways, you can not only add to it to increase the value, but since you can lock it at one value and then continue adding on to that, that's where it gets a little tricky, is understanding both of those. And also, not only that, having to have the one card in your hand in order to be able to do that, remembering that. And then, just doing that and hoping that on around when it gets back to your turn, that it's still there for you to harvest, and utilizing that to your best advantage.
Right.
It's very tricky.
It's tricky, and what I think as a player is I'm thinking about how I utilize the stockpile, how I make stockpiles. You can use it as a blocking action.
Yeah.
If you intuit that an opponent is going to be harvesting these cards from that field, you can stockpile on top of it, totally change the value, and then they can no longer harvest that. Which it had never occurred to me to do that until Spencer did it to me.
It's really neat because you have those neat decisions to make. It's not just face value of what you're doing, but there's a lot to consider when you're doing one of those three basic actions.
Yes, there is. There's, first of all, the Illimat itself in the middle of the board that can block you from doing certain actions in certain fields.
Yeah.
There's the cards in your hands. If you have a face card and you play it into a field, sowing, harvesting, stockpiling, you have to turn the Illimat so the season matches up with that. So that can hurt you, or you could block another player from being able to do what they need to do. But then the biggest thing is those luminaries.
Well, the luminaries,
Of being able to clear the field on your turn, hopefully, in order, first of all, to expose the luminary and get an Ocus token.
Yeah.
But then also to acquire that luminary.
Yeah, on a future turn.
Yes.
Yeah. And those are essential to getting lots of points.
Right, which that was kind of tricky for us. Not tricky, we just straight up were forgetting after we exposed the luminary to reseed the field.
Yeah, that is a thing you got to remember to do.
Yes.
But then continuing on with the crazy, not crazy, but the detailed decisions, you can take something as simple as sowing, right? As kind of like a throwaway action. Well, I can't harvest, I can't stockpile, so I'm just going to throw a card in here. But it's more than that, because you can possibly set up somebody else if you throw it in the right field, so you don't want to do that. You can also, hurt somebody in a way.
If they're going to try to clear that field.
Yeah, exactly. You can mess them up. So there's more to... there's several layers of everything that you're doing, which is really neat. On the surface, very simple, but very detailed in the way it plays out. So neat decisions. You got to kind of almost have to think several turns ahead.
Yes.
Especially with the way that stockpiling works.
Oh, yes, you do.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Which leads to almost a push your luck aspect of the game, too. You're pushing your luck that by setting up this stockpile for yourself, that somebody else doesn't come around and mess with it.
Right, with that either being taking it or turning the Illimat so that you can't harvest that stockpile anymore, or that you can't continue stockpiling there. Yeah.
Well, and so you talked about the luminaries.
Yes.
I like that there are several ways to get points. And, ways to think about. It's not just whoever collects the most cards, which is nice because you get the most points that way. But then whoever gets the most summer cards. So when you're collecting cards, that goes into your strategy too, of the types of cards that you're collecting.
Yes.
What do you not want to get?
Well, that again with the luminaries, you don't want to get winter cards because the most winter cards takes 2 points off of your total score. However, there is a particular luminary who flips that on its head. And
you gain 2 points.
You gain 2 points for having the most winter cards. And so the luminaries can make a huge difference in your gameplay. There's
a lot of stuff in flux, which is really neat. The state of the game can change pretty quickly based on those luminaries.
That's so true.
For sure. And then...
and something that you kept forgetting when we were totaling up our points is also counting how many fools you have collected in your hands.
In our first play of this game, I didn't even read that on the points. I just missed it.
Yeah, there on that point card, it says... Fools, Ocus tokens, and luminaries.
Yeah, and so that's another thing. If you collect somebody, because I know that we played a game where one person didn't always harvest the most cards, but because of the number of Fools that they had gained lots of points that way. So I like that you don't always have to be the one that collects the most cards. Yes, it gives you a great advantage, but
lots of different strategies at play, and that's super neat.
It is really neat. I feel like, with the exception of that stockpiling action, it's very straightforward to teach, right?
I agree, and so that's why I'm thinking of nowadays we're trying to grow the hobby of board gaming, and there are still so many people who, it is near and dear to my heart to play spades. I loved spades, or gin rummy, or something that you grew up playing. And if your family loved those games, this is a great way to move along. It feels familiar. Yeah. It kind of matches those mechanics that they are used to. And it's not that hard to explain.
No.
But then they can start digging in and finding more strategy, which is what you could do with those other card games with hearts and spades and bridge and all those things. Yeah. Very,
very, very good points there. So let's talk about the time to play on this one. The box says, I think it's 15 to 45 minutes.
Yes.
I don't know how you could ever do this in 15 minutes.
Spencer sat and thought about how on earth could you win in 15 minutes, which would basically be one round, right?
Yeah. No, it'd be one round.
Okay.
There's no way you could do that.
You don't think you could do 2 rounds in 15 minutes?
No.
Okay.
But basically, you'd have to get all of the achievements. You'd have to have the most cards.
You have to have the most cards, summer cards, all of the Ocus tokens, all of the luminaries.
And then several fools, really.
Or possibly the luminary that gives you the bonus for the winter cards, too.
So you have to destroy everybody, essentially, for it to be a 15-minute game.
Ruthless!
Well, and here's
you have to
why.
Get just the right cards.
Here's why, because you're going to 17 points. And this kind of has that, what I call the tug-of-war syndrome, that, something like Love Letter has.
Okay.
Where, someone might be in the lead, right? They get lots of points, but then, let's say, the next couple rounds, they don't do as well. So then you have to wait for somebody else to kind of come along and build up. And then it goes back to somebody else, maybe, that takes, and the other people don't. And, again, you don't have to always have the most points, or most cards to get points, which is good to kind of help deal with that.
Moving up. Yes.
Right, but you can have that where if you do really well one round, and you don't the next round, you've got to wait for everyone to kind of slowly but surely. If everyone's kind of evenly matched, it's going to take a while to finish this game. So definitely you're looking at more 45, almost 60 minutes.
If you want to go all the way to 17, you can house rule it and just say 10
That is a good point. One other thing, or a couple of other things, actually. What do you think of this as a 2-player game?
I honestly... The playing it 2-player was for me to learn the game, and there was a lot to learn with strategy because Spencer had played it a couple more times with more players, and so I would like to go back and try it again as a 2-player game this time with I have forethought to it and more experience, just to see if my opinion would change, because that first time it was really just
a learning game.
It was a learning game, and I didn't realize what was going on, and so it was very imbalanced.
Yeah. It's true. I think for me, even with the knowledge of having played before when we did our 2-player game, I don't know if I would recommend it, and here's why. You have to remove the star suit, which gives you less cards to put on the table, and also, whenever you discard a star face card, it's like a wild, so you can turn the box whichever way you want it to be. And you also don't have as many options, so you don't have as many people setting up stockpiles, seeding, or selling more cards.
You don't have as much conflict.
Right. And so I don't think, and just from my experience playing different player counts, I think, in my opinion, it's better suited at 3 or 4 than 2. It works, but it's not as enjoyable, and there's not as much to explore at a 2-player game.
Fair enough.
Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I think that pretty much is everything, that all of the awesome things that fit into this tiny box that is Illimat.
Exactly. So basically, Illimat is an excellent card game that has the appearance of being basic, but is anything but in reality. So, in answering the question posed at the beginning of this review, yes, we think Keith Baker successfully made a game that feels old, but also like something new entirely.
In fact, it feels like a gamer's card game. If hearts and spades don't do it for you anymore, you can move on to Illimat. You will have a sense of familiarity, but also have an awesome new experience.
There is a tendency for the game to go longer than you might expect, and we aren't 100% in agreement on it being a successful two-player game, but when you combine the fantastic quality, aesthetic, and overall gameplay, we're 100% sold on it in general.
And so, with that being said, we give Illimat a rating of 7.5 and a seal of approval. Check this one out if you're looking for a unique card game and a return to simplicity in a time when complexity can be king.
So we're going to box this one up for now, and if you do want to return to simplicity, it's super simple to find videos from the other awesome Dice Tower reviewers right here on this channel.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.